Get ready for that big test with Study.com. Study.com offers learning materials and test prep, even LSAT study prep guides for all of my legal nerds listening. Unfortunately, there aren't any wine study guides, and believe me, I did check. Listeners can get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level using the promo code CrimeOverWine. Again, that's promo code CrimeOverWine, no spaces, for 30% off your first 3 months at Study.com. Learn faster, stay motivated, study smarter with our sponsor, Study.com. How can a woman less than a half mile from her home disappear without a trace? This week, a detective's journey to find justice and a sister's journey to find answers. Episode 65 of Crime Over Wine starts right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and this week, my guest co-host is the owner of Speakeasy Productions in beautiful Chattanooga, Tennessee. My guest co-host this week is Madison McCann. Hello, Madison. So good to see you.
Hi, Liam. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'm so glad to have a podcast pro on this because I was like, you can probably show me a thing or two, and I know I can show you a thing or two about wine. So I feel like this is a very mutually beneficial relationship. I'm very excited.
I don't know about pro because usually I'm on the other side. So I hope I can do your podcast justice.
Well, we're gonna do our best. We're gonna do our best. I'm very excited so about the case, but also very specifically excited about the wine that we're gonna be drinking this week. So let's dive right into that. This week we are drinking Jay's Pinot Gris. It has versatility, crisp character, and bright fruit notes. It has layers of kaffir lime, green pear, and pineapple, complementing hints of jasmine and distinctive minerality and mouth-watering acidity. So, whoa. Yeah, yum. I know, right? There's a lot of, I don't know what a kaffir lime is. Green pear, sure, pineapple. But there's just a lot of different, varieties of flavors that, frankly, I've never even really heard of in a wine. And so this is really interesting. I have also, I have only ever drinking Jay's champagne as well. And everyone who's listening to this also knows how much I love some bubbly. And so I'm really excited to see what they do in a still wine.
Okay, so you've never had this before.
I've never had this one before.
Okay.
I tried to go for wines that on this podcast that I've never had before, so I can really kind of experience it with everybody else. So we're about to find out together.
Yeah,
Are you ready
let's
for
try
this?
it.
Let's do it. So what do you typically go for? Are you red drinker, white drinker? I know you say you don't know a lot about wines, but...
Yeah. Okay, really going to expose myself here. No, I don't know a single thing about wine. I don't usually drink wine, but I do usually opt towards more sweet wines, and it doesn't really matter to me red or white.
Okay, excellent. Well, we love that. Love an open-minded girl for sure. And so it's much lighter in look as well. So I have a feeling that this might be a little bit too dry for you.
Okay.
And so we're going to find out. But there's probably there's a lot of fruit flavors. So I'm thinking that that may balance out. Mm-hmm. So we're going to find out. So cheers to you, Madison.
Cheers.
So good to have you on. And it's so good. Also, this is the first episode, I should say, that I've ever recorded in person because Madison kindly let me use her studio and help me get out of the closet for the second time in my life. And so I'm very, very excited to be here in person with you because we just cheers. That was the very first in-person Crime Over Wine cheers.
Yes, I'm so glad that I got to be the first in-person guest on your podcast.
Excellent.
And I can't believe it took 65 episodes.
I know, 65 episodes to get out of the closet. You know, it's life comes and hits you fast. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent. Well, it's drier for sure. It's fruitier, but still on the drier side.
It's not too dry for me though. Mm-hmm. I can get a little bit of sweetness out of it too.
Yeah. And it's mineral forward for sure. It's a smoother kind of wine. And that's typically because whenever I drink too much, specifically with Pinot Gris, as well, whenever I drink, a much too sweet kind of white wine, it just gets it all in the mouth and it just explodes. This is very much so. It's smooth. It comes right off the tongue, and it doesn't really linger all that much either as well. Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be able to identify it without you telling me beforehand, but I think I'm getting a little bit of that pear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pears is usually a very strong flavor in wine for sure, and it's identifying. It could also be the lime a little bit too. But it's funny because I actually, the very first flavor I tasted was the pineapple. That was the first thing I noticed, but I also love pineapples so much. And so maybe that's just
yeah, me too. I'm not really getting that.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. See, it's just, but I feel like if you just really take a sip and really tune in on the flavor of pineapple, and I think you probably will get it.
A little bit, but it's really the pear that's sticking out to me.
The pear in the front, I'm getting the pineapple more in the back as well, which is interesting. Like it's much more of an aftertaste. But the case that I have to tell you about this week, Madison, I have not stopped thinking about this since I first heard about this 5 years ago. So that just goes to show you, how obsessive with this case I am. I'm going to tell you actually the first ever. This is a very special episode, Madison, because this is the first ever true crime case that I've ever interacted with personally as a reporter, as a professional true crime lover. So I actually worked with reporters on this story very, very briefly. I won't lie to you guys. I was an intern in Charleston when I first heard about this several years ago, but ever since then, I have not been able to stop thinking about it. And so this week, I'm going to tell you the story of a woman who, by all accounts, was giving life everything that she had to offer. But one day, just like any other she had ever lived, may have ended up being her last. This week, I want to tell you about Tina Snipes, the housekeeper on Edisto Island. So we all have a pretty cyclical nature. It's not the first time I've talked about this on this podcast. Things that we do absolutely every single day, maybe without even realizing it. Day to day, it can make our lives easier. But when we know the kids, have to be picked up from school, we know when the spouse may be late for work and why, or when the mailman is supposed to come and where he leaves the packages when they do come. But Tina Snipes took those routines to a whole new level. Tina very much so had her daily schedule. She would wake up and spend most of her day hanging out at the gas station mart at the end of her long dirt road on Edisto Island in South Carolina. That was if she didn't have to work. She had just recently gotten work cleaning beach houses on Edisto Island, right in South Carolina's Lowcountry. And even when she was scheduled to work, she would go to this mart and get a ride from the woman who was giving her work to go to whatever condo she was assigned to that day. Tina had her car break down a while ago and relied on that woman religiously to get to and from work. Tina was originally from South Georgia, but life got hard very, very fast for her. She divorced from her husband after what seemed to be a really ugly ending to her marriage. And shortly after she got divorced, she met Ronald Miles, who she met while she was walking her dog one day while she was living in Norcross, Georgia, a coastal Georgia town about an hour and a half north of Jacksonville, Florida. And it was love at first sight. Ronald was a small man with a great smile. She was a small woman, 5'3", about 113 pounds. Tina was an Army veteran with 2 children, and it was clear to just about everyone who knew Tina, especially her sister Lisa, that she was going through it at this point in life. It all just seemed to be catching up to her very, very fast, and this move on to Edisto Island seemed to be just an attempt to just start all over. But when Tina had gone to Edisto Island with Ronald, her relationship with the rest of her family became more and more distant. She would text or call her sister and her kids several times a week, but that was pretty much it.
I can see how for anyone, one thing can domino the rest of your life.
Right.
Like her car breaking down and relying on someone else and then going through a divorce. It's just, life is just taking its toll on her.
Right. Yeah, and I've seen that so many times too in so many different cases, right? Where it just feels like, like little things add up, right? Where it's just you have like this happens and then, next thing the car breaks down and the next thing like maybe you lose your job or next thing like it can feel overwhelming sometimes, right? And especially to a specific type of person, I could easily see where life was just getting too much in South Georgia, and no matter what was holding her there, it was just time to go. It was time to go somewhere else. And often too, right, when you meet someone who you find that really close bond with as well, it can be really easy to let some of the people who maybe represented it to a certain extent, maybe not directly, but indirectly, by association kind of thing, the life that you used to have that you don't want to live anymore for one reason or another. And that kind of change, I feel like there's something psychologically there. There has to be that, that kind of change just does something to your mind and just makes you like really want to do a 180 in your life for some reason. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm a suspicious person already. And
you're in good company.
just thinking that she met this man and was swept away makes me suspicious of him. And poor Ronald, like, I don't know if he had anything to do with this, but I already have my eye on him.
Sure. Yeah. No, Ronald's, that's fair. And again, listen, stereotypes about, it's usually the spouse, or stereotypes because 90% of the time, or whatever the statistics are, say that it's usually the spouse. And so it's not for a bad reason. But again, it's like, so you meet this person in South Georgia, and it's like, what kind of how special could that have been? Like, what kind of connection could that have been? What was going on to make you move to a different country, like away from your kids, away from your family, away from the life that you had been living up to that point, 40 plus years. It's like, who was Ronald? What was he all about? And what could he have possibly said and done to convince her to do that, if it required any convincing? Maybe it was Tina's idea. We don't really know.
Right. Some people are really vulnerable, and especially even more so whenever they're having a lot of bad things going on in their life. And she probably saw something good in him and let herself fall into it.
And it's so easy to do that, right? It's so easy to do that. It's so easy to make it think that this is going to solve all the problems, right? Like, or even if it's temporary, it's so easy to do that. And it's really easy to fool even yourself. Even if somebody else isn't fooling you, it's easy to fool yourself. Very, very easy. So, but life though, seemed to feel very, very safe on Edisto Island. Again, this was like a very small quintessential beach town. Tina had her daily routine, and a part of that routine involved the close friends that she made while hanging out at the mart, just again, a quarter mile from her house. Like clockwork, she would show up there every single day by foot. She was a regular. She found friendship and refuge at that mart, creating bonds with employees and customers alike. Customers later told reporters that they remembered her sitting at the store all day, largely, just minding her own business. She just liked to be there. They said that they could count on seeing Tina with her hair tied up in a bun, wearing sunglasses and a cross pendant necklace. They told the Post and Courier, the newspaper in South Carolina, that they could tell that she had been through a lot in her life, saying, quote, "You could tell there was just a hard life on her face."
That's interesting. That a lot of people noticed her. So she must have been friendly to them at least.
Right.
But to be there every day, all day, is kind of
pretty
weird. Like,
yeah. And
what else could you be doing?
Right. Well, and that's fair. And I think that there's like something to be said too about just knowing that the people who, you like in this world are going to be there, right? Like they have to be there because they work. And so that's where they work. And so I think that there's something like, again, kind of what you said, a little strange, a little odd about that, but also kind of special and touching.
Yeah, comforting.
That like whenever because you don't want to be in your house, and we're about to find out the conditions that Tina lived in, and they weren't great. But she doesn't want to be in the house, and so let's go to the mart because this is where I like to be. These people are nice to me. None of these people really give me a hard time about being here. So why not? Why wouldn't I just sit here?
Yeah, sure. Okay, I can see that.
Yeah, and to your point too about wanting all these people who likely went there on a regular basis, right? Because again, small beach town, not a whole lot of people stay there year round, and so they probably do go there for their groceries or for whatever they need for their gas. And so they the fact that she was there enough for those people to also notice how often she was there, I think says a lot about her, about the routines that she had been experiencing, about about just the life that she is experiencing, and the impression that she leaves on people as well.
Yeah. And I'm imagining that she must stick out in some way, because if I went to a store, once a week or whatever, I wouldn't recognize anyone there.
Yeah, that's fair.
Unless they were doing something weird or saying something weird or just, I don't know.
Yeah, and that's fair. And then that also makes me wonder again, because we're very early on in this story, but we're about to find out some things. And so I'll just put a pin in that. But I also have to wonder then too, are the reasons why she's standing out for good reasons, because she was nice to people, because she, because people liked being around her, because she was fine, or were they because kind of what you're saying before about because of kind of eyebrow raising reasons, like who is she? Like, side eye, like, like for put offish reasons, like what were people noticing her for? Is I think pretty key to figuring out exactly who Tina was.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, but nonetheless, the woman that Tina met at the mart became more like sisters to her. They looked out for each other, often staying late to make sure that they got home safe at night. They created a real bond together. And so they knew when the other one was acting just a bit off and when they weren't acting within their normal routines and habits. And so on August 15th, 2018, when Tina started exhibiting those odd behaviors that were just outside of her normal routine, that was noticed right away. But that day started out just like any other. Tina left her camper about a quarter mile away from the Horizon Easy Shop gas station, hung around for a little bit before getting into the passenger side of a car and driving off. Now, I have a lot of questions about this for sure, and I know you all do too, but it's not totally clear if this was the same kind of car that she would normally get into to get to work. And it also isn't totally clear if Tina's friends knew who the person was who was driving the car that day. But they clearly didn't think that it was anything out of the ordinary based on like their interactions and the way that they've reacted to this whole situation. But again, to be clear, like she was usually getting rides to and from this gas station anyways. So maybe for that reason, it just didn't really raise an eyebrow. But obviously, in hindsight, definitely eyebrow raising for sure. And interestingly, the woman who was giving Tina work later said that Tina texted her that day saying that her phone was out of minutes, but that she would still be able to report to work as normal and that she would be at the Horizon Gas Mart just like she always was every other day.
Okay. So her friend saw her get in this car and... Okay, if they didn't notice anything suspicious, I'm thinking, okay, there's nothing suspicious because she would be acting a little weird. Like,
sure. And again, like these people are very close. These are all people who like have seen a thing or two, right? And like know when things are off. And so I think, to that point, like if there was something even just as a little bit strange about this, that like Tina shouldn't have gone off into this car, I feel very confident that they would have done something right then and there, just based on what I know about Tina's relationship with these women. And so to that point, because Tina seems like this independent woman, like maybe it just didn't really seem, worthy to go to, look at who was driving the car, who's this person, what kind of car are they driving? Maybe it was a different car every day, that's very possible as well. And so I feel like I need to know a whole lot more information about the circumstances behind her getting these rides and what kind of rides she was getting, who she was getting them from, in order for me to really fully understand, just how suspicious this was, or if it was just seemed to be, very much so in character for Tina.
Well, I'm thinking like girl code. Like if I saw someone drive up that I know, and I'm sitting there with my friends, I'm like, hey, I know that person. I'm going to go talk to them for a minute and I'll be right back. Mm-hmm. Or, hey, I'll see you later. Like, I'm going to go.
Right.
So I'm wondering what she said to them before.
Right. And and again, I think very clear, like this was the same day that she, because she always reports to work on Sundays. That's the day that she cleans the condos. And so this was a Sunday. She went to work. She said it was the exact time that she said that she was going to go to work. And two, interestingly as well, there was, the timeline here I think is really, really important because the text was sent and I getting the vibe that it was sent a couple days before to the woman who was giving Tina work, that she wasn't gonna have minutes, she would still be at the mart, everything would be fine. And so for that reason, it's kind of unclear as to whether or not like she was picked up from the car and then sent from the mart and then sent the text message, potentially, because again, like when the text message is sent is really unclear. I'm just getting the potential vibe that maybe it was just a couple days before and then she left. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
I can't imagine that she would text after she was supposed to be picked up or that same about time saying, I don't have minutes, but I'm still gonna be there.
Yeah.
Like it had to be before?
Yeah, I would guess so, right? I mean, because the only reason I think that, right, because I've done so many of these cases where it's like it's if someone does something bad to somebody, they'll take the phone and like send to try to get by them a little bit more time. That has happened. That's like quintessential, right? Crime 101 kind of thing. Like that's the first place to look. And so with that being said, I don't have any reason to believe that Tina did not send these text messages. I'll just put it that way. I'm looking at this like kind of critically of like, okay, is it possible she didn't send the text messages? And I just don't think that the evidence completely rules out, in my opinion, that she didn't. She wasn't the one to send the text messages, in my opinion. I could be proven wrong. I'll put it that way. But, the Horizon Gas Mart was the last place that Tina Snipes would ever be seen, even to this day. It was just in a few blurry frames of security camera video showing Tina walking around the store at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon in a textured tank top, yoga pants, flip-flops, a necklace, sunglasses, and her hair pulled back into a bun. And here, Madison, why don't you take a look at this photo? And we are also going to put it on our social media pages and link to it on our website and in our show notes as well.
Oh, so, okay. Yeah, you can't really tell much about that.
I can't even really tell that that's Tina, if I'm being completely honest. I mean, they seem very confident that it is, but it's very nondescript.
Well, they did say that they always recognized her wearing a bun. That woman has a bun.
Yeah.
But she's wearing sunglasses indoors.
Yeah. It does seem to me that this is like typically how Tina presented herself. These are the kind of clothes that she would wear. She always had this pendant necklace on. She was usually wearing flip-flops. Like you said, she was usually had her hair back, pulled up back in a bun. And I think too, like people were here around the store as well. And like again, she was usually visiting friends when she went to go to the store. And so I have to imagine that maybe they were like, yep, like that lines up with the time that she was probably here. That lines up with the path that she usually took, that lined up to what she was wearing that day. And so, but to that point, like it's not a very clear photo at all. And so I don't know. But again, like this is pretty much the last frame that anyone would ever see Tina before she got into that car and drove off, and who knows what happens next, frankly. So again, we're going to put that picture on our social media pages on Facebook and Instagram. And we're also going to link to it on our website as well. But, her friends end up reporting Tina missing 2 days later after Tina never showed up to the store again after August 15th. And again, she is there practically every single day. A detective visited the store, saw that footage, and heard about Tina and her daily trips to the store and how they had just stopped abruptly over the last few days. Again, completely out of character for Tina. The detective then drove the quarter mile down the dirt road to where Tina's friend said she had been staying. He pulled up to the camper, which, looked just pretty disheveled. It was frankly not exactly the kind of environment that most people would want to live in. They were just stuffed kind of placed just about pretty much everywhere, and just, again, not great conditions in this camper. And as he looked around, he saw more and more very concerning things. The detective found several items that belonged to Tina just scattered all across the property, things that, the average person, according to this detective, wouldn't believe she would leave the house without. The detective wouldn't say what the items were and where they were found exactly, just that they were completely out of place but within walking distance of the home. The detective elaborated on a recent episode of the Charleston County Sheriff's Office podcast, The Beat, that he couldn't elaborate on why due to the ongoing investigation, but did say that he believed the discovery of those scattered items to be evidence of foul play.
We went there. We were dispatched there on August the 17th. I went out there, which was a Friday afternoon, and I found signs of some type of foul play. Something took place. She did not voluntarily leave her little trailer.
So when you say that there's evidence of foul play, are you able to expand a little bit more on that?
No.
Okay.
The reason why I won't expand, because it's part of the crime.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the crime. And I want to just explain that. I don't want to give you an answer for a no. But if it's a part of the incident, we don't release any facts of a crime, because all this is used later on if we end up in the criminal justice system.
No, and that's fine. It's good to know that, because I know in a lot of situations, particularly as an outsider or civilian looking in, you often wonder, okay, well, I know there's more details, but why don't I get to know more details? And it's good to know that it's because it is for the privacy of the victim and also for the investigation itself you can't release too much details for fear of corrupting that investigation.
Yes.
Right. So that's just one of those scenarios.
Our evidence was at her trailer. So that would be her last location that I would document in the criminal case if we ended up going to court for any reason.
Okay.
That makes me think that whatever they found, it's clear who did it. Because if they released that, then that person would know.
Yeah. Right. Or at least know that they knew that they were on to them and to a certain extent, right? Like it has to, that's a very good point, because I feel like I've never seen that level of secrecy in a case, not personally anyways, because typically it's like there has to, like, because he's clearly talking as though he knows something definitive. And so, like, regardless of whether that definitive thing is, how whatever happened, or what it is, or points to a specific person, but he's clearly, indicating that it indicates a specific thing that happened to Tina in some way, shape, or form. And so it's odd to me anyways. And again, without knowing what he's referring to here, it's odd to me that he is keeping that away. Only because typically they'll put out just enough to back up exactly what they're thinking, and exactly what they need to prove to the public, especially around a case like this where there's like a decent amount of attention and people are asking questions, and and point being is like it seems. I'll put it this way, and he alludes to this much later on in clips that we're gonna play for you. Like he clearly believes that Tina has died, and so at this point, and so it seems to me as though it's based off of the evidence that they found at their home, and so it's odd to me, I suppose, that they talk about this evidence, clearly allude to it, proving that she has passed, but not exactly saying what that evidence is and how it proves that she has passed.
How long after her disappearance was this interview?
So this was just this past October in 2023, and so she went missing in August of 2018. So more than 5 years, more than 5 years later.
Wow, and they still haven't released more information or arrested someone.
Not at this point. Again, spoiler alert, big time.
Okay,
but yeah, no, big time spoiler alert. But yeah, I always like to, I don't like to lead you guys on. I don't like to lead you guys on if I can, avoid you guys being a little mad at me toward the end of an episode because there's not enough, wrapping up here. But to that point, there's, they have not really, alluded to any of that. And so to the point of what you're saying before, Madison, it leads me to believe that evidence is substantial enough that if they were to talk about it publicly, it could be detrimental.
Right. And how definitive he was and saying, if this were to go to trial or whatever, like that's the plan.
Right. Exactly. Otherwise they would just, if they didn't think that it was relevant, right. You're so right about that. They would just release it publicly. You're so right. And to like, if it, it makes me wonder what exactly that evidence is exactly. And how damning it is, how bad it is, and how it must point to something very, very specific, Right.
And it must be someone that she knows well. If it was in her home.
Potentially. Right. Absolutely. But, detectives, end up searching the property and the surrounding areas many times by foot, water, and the air, and said that she had gone missing under mysterious circumstances, and detectives deemed her disappearance straight up suspicious, but again, would not elaborate on why exactly, beyond saying that it was due to the items that they had found at Tina's home. They initially treated her case as a missing persons case, but later elevated it to a straight up homicide, saying that was largely because they could get more resources that way, but not necessarily because they had more evidence pointing to Tina definitely being dead.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Bits and pieces from people on what happened to her. And again, we're talking foul play. So I'll just keep it general. There was a foot search done by our search and rescue for Charleston County. The dive team went out, checked the waterways, and we haven't had any luck in recovering Tina Snipe if she's deceased. Okay? She may still be alive. I don't know. Because We don't have anything to tell us either way. But I'm working this along with my other detectives as a homicide. Not that it is, but we put in more, there's more things we can do. We don't work them any harder if it's a homicide or a missing person. But when you have somebody missing for a long period of time with no contact with the family, even though she was a loner, still she would contact somebody. That's only natural.
I just don't really know what to think about that because I'm not as familiar as other people, certainly not as much as you, about the process for that. Them saying we have more resources if we declare this a homicide. Not that we take it any more seriously or work it any harder. And it's like, well, that's actually exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, it is odd. It's a weird, I guess maybe he's trying to say in terms of like the amount of time or care that they put into it. Maybe that's, or like the number
like
of.
They care just as much, but
right.
They can spend more time on it.
Well, I think the way that I read that actually is kind of, it's almost through the legal process, because it makes the first thing that came to my mind was search warrants. And like maybe that if you present it and present it to a judge that you believe that this person has died, maybe you are more likely to get a search warrant from authorization from a judge, and so therefore you can execute that, or maybe people are going to be more likely to cooperate. Right, that's a big thing. That's a big thing with these kind of cases is that the witnesses that you need to get to cooperate with you maybe are more likely to cooperate with you if they believe that they are cooperating with a homicide investigation as opposed to a missing person, which it just has too many open ends. So I think of that in a couple different ways for that. I thought about that a lot because I was, it was like resources, like how do you get more resources? Like does like your chief like authorize more? And that didn't make any sense to me at all, because it almost feels like there's more at stake for a missing persons investigation.
Right.
That you would,
like they could still be out there.
they could very much still be out there, right? And like who knows what happens in that situation, right? And so I was thinking that much, but then so maybe it was just like you get more like outside funding or something. I don't know. It's just there's a lot of different avenues, and again, it's like it's interesting because he's being so open about it, right, by like doing this podcast and like talking about this very openly and clearly in a way to get attention for Tina Snipes, but then also just being so incredibly vague that I'm like, I have so many more questions than I did before I was listening to you.
Right, me too.
Yeah, so I don't know. Again, I have to imagine that maybe it was just like a warrant thing, that it's like you can get more search warrants, that you can get more people to cooperate. You can, again, we're going to talk about how, they may be interested in talking to some people who may be in jail. So that's a big teaser, and so maybe they're more likely to get authorization to go into a jail and talk to an inmate if it's about a homicide investigation.
Yeah, and another thing that came to mind for me was maybe an interrogation tactic. If they have a suspect and they're like, "You're gonna be arrested for murder," as opposed to kidnapping. I don't know. I mean, she's an adult, but you know what I mean. And then that person is like, no, like she's still alive. I don't know. I see this play out on TV, so maybe
No, that's fair. No, that's not. Well, and listen, one thing I've learned about, from all the people who I know who in this kind of world, is that TV in terms of the tactics, not that far off. And so you're probably not that far off, frankly. But even besides them being a suspect, I think about also the people who maybe witnesses who if you're trying to interrogate that person to cooperate because they know something, they know a little bit too much, then maybe they'll be more likely to cooperate if it's a possible homicide investigation, even if they're not necessarily suspected of doing anything.
True.
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about Ronald, though? Where did he go?
Yeah, we have not talked about Ronald at all in this whole episode, and I think that is very, very relevant for sure. And there's a really good reason why we haven't talked about Ronald Madison, because it's not totally clear like what he's thinking about Tina at this point. It's not totally clear like what he's actually, believes happened to Tina, but it is pretty obvious what he's doing, and it's not a lot, Madison, because at the time of Tina's disappearance, Ronald was actually in a state prison. Crime Over Wine is sponsored by BetterHelp. As someone who's used therapy for years, I know that finding a therapist can sometimes be a stress on its own, juggling your full-time job, your family, your friends, your podcast, and trying to find the right therapist on top of that can almost feel impossible. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist that works for you on your terms. It's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to one of 33,000 licensed professional therapists in as little as a few days. And because finding a new therapist is a lot like finding a new bottle of wine, if you don't jive with your therapist, you can easily switch to a new one at no additional cost. You can get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/crimeoverwine. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/crimeoverwine for 10% off your first month. Join over 4 million people who decided to get help and get happy with BetterHelp.
Hello, Crime Over Wine listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered
to survivors and women who empower you.
And of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
Ronald was serving time in state prison for attempted murder. He was arrested in August of 2017, so a year before Tina went missing, and it was confirmed that he was still in jail when Tina went missing. So he was ruled out as a suspect for that reason. Of course, as I like to say, his hands were tied. So here's what happened, though, that led to Ronald's criminal charges. A guy ended up showing up at Ronald and Tina's camper one evening, like absolutely livid, again, about a year before Tina went missing, and started arguing with Ronald about money. It was at the same trailer that Tina was believed to have disappeared from a year later. Well, somehow this argument escalated, and Ronald ended up shooting this guy in the leg. Ronald was charged, and investigators later interviewed him in prison after Tina disappeared, and investigators said publicly to reporters that they know he didn't have anything to do with Tina's disappearance directly, and they also don't believe he had anything to do with Tina's disappearance indirectly either.
Okay. But that other guy's family I could see, you took our family from us, we're going to take your family from you. And he's not there to defend.
Sure. So this guy lived, just to be clear, the guy who Ronald shot.
Attempted murder.
Attempted murder.
Okay.
Yeah. So he shot him in the leg. He was fine. I'm sure he was hurt. But I liked where you're going with that.
He could come back after her.
He could come back. He clearly has every reason to. And again, I think about he clearly knows where Tina lives and knows where Ronald lives and knows, Ronald's away, that he went to jail and Ronald's not there. And Tina's very much so home alone. So listen, not accusing anybody of anything. We didn't name this man in this episode for that reason, but it's very interesting to me. And again, I don't believe in coincidences in any situation. I definitely don't believe in coincidences when it comes to criminal investigations. And so when I think about two crimes that are committed on the same small little camper lot, I don't 100% buy that those two things are not related.
Right. And sorry, Ronald, that I was suspicious of you at the beginning, but you did shoot someone. So.
He was, again, his hands were tied. Yeah, right. Yeah. Ronald clearly isn't scot-free in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, that's very, very fair. But, Tina's sister, Lisa, listen to this, Madison, apparently had no idea that Ronald was in jail. And that Tina was living completely alone at this camper as a result of that. And that was all despite their regular contact, including in the week leading up to Tina's disappearance when they were discussing Tina's plans for Christmas and about a relative who was in the hospital.
Okay, I'm an only child, so I can't really relate to this. But I can't imagine talking to someone regularly and for a year not mentioning that my fiance was in jail. Right. I mean, obviously there might be a little bit of embarrassment there, but still, I think that would take a lot of lies because surely her sister's like, hey, how's Ronald doing? And Tina's just like, oh yeah, he's fine. Like,
right. Yeah. Well, and so I got the impression again, because I didn't meet Lisa directly, but I have heard many of her interviews, and I've, was there at one point when she was getting interviewed again, because I was an intern when I was talking about this case, or when this case was going on. And so I did one single story, just to be clear. I just want to, make that crystal clear. But I did kind of get the impression that it was possible that, because I remember Lisa saying that, Ronald's fine, like everything's cool. Like she never got like any sort of, bad, like no, never, believe that he would be capable of hurting Tina in any way, shape, or form. But like they definitely weren't like buds by any means, like, right. Like they definitely weren't, like, she wasn't like thrilled that Tina was getting married to Ronald by any means.
And like moving away
away from her kids. And so for sure, like I could see where it was like, okay, this guy, like, like Tina is going away with Ronald. Lisa is like, what is happening? Why are you going away? What is going on here? And then, and Lisa expressing her disapproval with this decision, and Tina being like, it's fine. And then going away. And then, at the back end being like, okay, you were clearly right about this guy. Right. Again, even if it, or maybe, she's not even thinking that, like, she just doesn't want Lisa to think that she was right about Ronald, even if she wasn't.
Okay. Now I'm wondering why she stayed there instead of moving back home if he was in jail or prison. Yeah. And like, why is she just hanging out at the gas station all day?
Yeah. And again, so a couple different thoughts there, right? Like one, like she did have a job. She had a job there that, again, cleaning condos is certainly not like, bringing the buku coins, but it's certainly
probably
enough.
Groceries and stuff.
It's enough, right? If you live in a camper, right? It's enough to get by. She had friends there. Like she had a life there, right? Like it's hard, right? It's hard to just up and move. Like I've moved up and moved 4 different times in my life. Like it's hard to be able to just do that. And especially when you don't have a car, you really don't have anything back in Georgia that you didn't have when you left, in terms of like your family. Like that was pretty much all that you had in South Georgia. Like she really didn't have anything else happening for her, frankly. And so it was probably very, very difficult to admit that she wants to go back, that she has no other choice but to go back, that this is the best, that it didn't work out. And again, there's like a certain amount of pride there too, I would imagine. I don't know anything about like Tina and Lisa's relationship directly in terms of if they were really close friends or what have you. But I do know that, that again, I'm not an only child. I'm one of 4. And so I know that like that competition with siblings, like I will never admit that any of my siblings are right about anything, right? Because that's just how it is. And so maybe that there's a little bit of that going on.
True. Yeah. And I realize that I'm probably coming up from a place of privilege to think like, well, if I just told someone that I wanted to come home, they'd figure out a way to get me there. Well, and they might not have those luxuries.
Yeah. Well, but to your point though, Madison, like I do, like it was very clear to me that if Tina wanted to come home, like Lisa would have made it happen. Okay. That was very, very clear to me. Even just from watching the stories, that Lisa would have moved heaven and earth to make sure that was going to happen. So, don't feel too bad about that, I suppose, is the point of that. But, at some point between the day that Tina went missing and the first anniversary of her disappearance, Ronald was released from prison and spoke to multiple news outlets about Tina and about how much she just loved her and missed her and wanted her to come home. But as the months went on and on without any sign of Tina or any evidence uncovered that could lead them any closer to finding her, investigators continued to reassure Tina's family, the media, and the public that they were continuing to investigate her disappearance and would continue to do so until they got closure. Around the second anniversary of Tina's disappearance, investigators told Live 5 News, the CBS affiliate in Charleston, that they had recently interviewed numerous individuals and had searched possible locations of interest. They had also said that they had interviewed an inmate in a state prison around this time who they believed to have had relevant information about Tina's disappearance. Now, if that produced anything significant, investigators never released that publicly, but the lead detective on the case did float in the Charleston County Sheriff's Office podcast a really interesting theory, possibly, that did stand out to me.
At the time of her disappearance, she was married. Her husband was away. He wasn't away voluntarily. And he was incarcerated. All right. And she still had contact with him. So she was a person that had a husband. And when he was released for whatever he did from Department of Corrections, she was gone. You know. So we look at aspects of his life. Was there somebody that wanted to bother her because of him?
Right.
There's so many directions we go, and people are reluctant to cooperate with the police, not because they don't want to, they're in fear.
Right.
They have to testify in court. That's how our court system works.
Well, in particular, in cases where you suspect foul play, then they may fear that for themselves as well.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, so exactly what we were talking about earlier.
Pretty much. Yeah. But to that point, though, again, kind of what you're talking about, and so first of all, I have to say that, the detective referred to Ronald and Tina as being married. I have only ever seen that they were engaged and that they had plans to get married. So maybe they were like, they had like a courthouse, whatever situation, like they signed the certificate, but never actually had a ceremony. So, but neither here nor there, I suppose. But point being is, so to that point of, that the spouse is usually involved. Again, that was, Madison's original assumption here. And so it doesn't, you have to at least go down that hole of like, who's connected to him? Who does he know? Who does he not get along with? Right. Like what's in his past that could have driven something up here, because it's also interesting. And I think that we haven't really talked about this, but I think it's really notable here that the fact that Tina really doesn't have a lot of connections and certainly doesn't seem to have a lot of enemies as a result. Right, because she has Ronald, she has a few friends at the gas station, she has the woman who's giving her work at the condo house cleaning service, and that was pretty much it, right? And so it's as far as I can tell, anyways. And so it's interesting to me that there's this man who clearly, has something going on, at the very least, has criminal charges, right, regardless of whatever else is going on as a result. And then there's this woman who really seems to keep to herself a whole lot. And it just seems like the obvious choice here is like, let's see what's in this dude's past and see what's going on, even if we don't think that he had anything to do with it directly.
Yeah. And one thing that we haven't really talked about, but the car that she got into, and it could be the person that was picking her up to go to work, but that's the last person that she saw. Right. And
who is that person?
Who is that person? Did she actually go to work? If she did go to work, then is the woman that's giving her the condo cleaning job, is she a suspect?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're right. We haven't talked about this, but I need to know about this person. You're so right about that. And because that person has never come forward, just to be crystal clear. That person is never specifically said. I don't even think that they've been identified necessarily, possibly even at all. Because also there's no link between who because again, Tina's phone didn't have any minutes. She wasn't texting anybody. So who knows who, there's no paper trail behind.
Yeah, I'm sure she's getting paid in cash too.
Probably, right, exactly. And I also have to say too, to that point. So she was caught on security camera video at the gas station around 3 p.m. She gets into the car, drives off, cool. And then I kind of noted this like very, very briefly, but I think it's very, very significant. So the detective believes that she went missing between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock at the house. And so that 5-hour period, I have a lot of questions about. But then it makes me think, okay, well, maybe they were able to determine for sure that she went to work that day.
Yeah, that makes sense. That like timeline wise, like I don't know how long it takes to clean a condo, but a couple hours.
Sure.
And then, or multiple condos, I don't know.
Sure.
And then that person took her home instead of obviously taking her back to the gas station a block away at 9 p.m.
Right. So. Well, but that was always her routine, that she would get driven back to the gas station and then walk back to the house. And so that's to that point, because I'm really glad you brought this up, because again, I've been going nuts over this case for the past 5 years. So welcome to my brain, Madison. But so I don't understand why, unless she was just like, yeah, bring me home and everything and cool, like that's fine if you want to, but like she never really wanted to make anyone drive down that dirt road. for her, but maybe this person was willing to do it this night. Like, okay. And then got back to the house. But point being, so is that this was the one time that clearly that broke. And so why did that break? What made it break? Who was okay with it breaking? You know what I mean? Like,
no such thing as a coincidence.
No such thing as a coincidence. Definitely not. And so, yeah, so I have a lot of questions, and I'm glad you brought this up, because I have a lot of questions about this ride back and forth and how it happened and what the circumstances were. And again, who was involved. And I think that would probably answer a whole lot of questions. And I wonder if the detective knows who that person is and knows that they may be involved in some way, shape, or form, or maybe not. Because that's the kind of information that they would keep close to the chest and wouldn't release to the public if they knew that person was involved in some way.
Yeah. So many questions.
So many questions. Again, welcome to my brain for the last 5 years. So in the years after Tina's disappearance, media stories would pop up around the anniversary of Tina going missing, but, not much more. Again, the Charleston County Sheriff's Office did an episode of a podcast they produced just on Tina, and it provided a lot of information using this episode, even though it really didn't provide a whole lot of new details or any details at all, frankly. We're going to link to that episode on our website and in our show notes so that you can listen to it in full. Tina's sister, Lisa, has spoken to reporters a lot in the years since Tina went missing. We asked her to be interviewed for this episode, and she responded saying she really wanted to, but it was just too difficult to talk about her sister even after all these years, who she describes as a shy, trusting, and a sweet woman who likely just lost her way. In the weeks and months after Tina's disappearance, Lisa would host weekly prayer vigils for Tina, but those have since dropped off. Today, Lisa says she feels as though she has done everything she can for Tina, which I guess is like the blessing in all of this, I suppose. She runs a Facebook group today called Missing Find Tina Snipes, where she posts regular updates on Tina's case and posts updates on what would have been Tina's life as well. Tina's sons are now young adults, and now her older son just got married recently, and they had a very premature baby who died shortly after being born. On the baby's obituary, it states they were preceded in death by her grandmother, Tina Snipes.
Interesting. Again, I'm a really suspicious person. And she's running this Facebook group called Missing Find Tina Snipes. But then in an obituary, they're saying that she's dead.
Yeah. So to be clear, so she made this Facebook group very shortly after she went missing. So maybe she did believe that she went missing after that, and maybe she even still wants to believe that she is still missing, or does actually believe that she is still missing in some way, shape, or form.
Then the police are saying we're investigating as a homicide. Right. Okay.
Right. So there's that. So, again, I say this every single week, but every single week that I cover a cold case anyways. But it just feels like there's something here that like one person could really speak up and break this whole thing wide open, if it's the person who drove the car or whoever it may be. And so I say, with so much like chutzpah here, please, people, if you know anything about Tina Snipes' disappearance, call the Charleston County Sheriff's Office at 843-202-1270 or the Crime Stoppers of the Lowcountry at 843-554-1111. But that is all that we have for you this week. So Madison, thank you so much for coming on and chatting about this with me.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And I really enjoyed this glass of wine too.
Yeah. Oh, well, good. I'm so glad. I hope that everything went, was this your first true crime and wine experience? Was that good? Was it everything you were?
Yeah. I would love to come back. I hate that we don't get a resolution on this, but
right.
I know that's usually how it goes.
Right. Well, next time around we can have you on and we can do a nice clean, like we know who did it. We don't
won't keep me up at night.
Right. Well, my friend Dr. Tiffany Bartel, very much so, and she's coming on next week, I believe. And she has always told me about how she can't do cases where she doesn't know what happens, and so I'll lump you into that category as well. If that makes you feel better, if that helps you sleep as well, sleep better. But tell everyone where they can find you and your work online. You do fantastic podcast work, and you produce some of your own podcasts as well, or some podcasts as well, right?
Yes. So I produce and edit podcast, and you can learn more about my business at speakeasyproductions.co, or you can follow me on Instagram, speakeasyproductions.co.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for coming on, Madison.
thank you, Liam,
It's been
for
a pleasure.
having me.
My first in-person guest, so I feel
Right.
honored.
Hopefully not the last.
Hopefully not the last. One day I'll have a real studio. I won't have to record in my closet. I'll elevate through the world like you did. But thank you again so much for coming on. Thank you all so much for listening. And we're going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories too. And if you are just loving this podcast and are just looking for a way to tell everyone and anyone about it, the best way to help people discover this podcast is by leaving us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you are listening right now. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're wondering what we have in store for you next week, here's a quick sneak peek. Hello, everybody. It's Liam.
And I'm Tiffany Bartell, host of the podcast How Would You Rate Your Pain? I'm joining the Crime Vineyard next week with the case of a killer drag queen that became the center of a national manhunt. Did Brandy West really kill Patrice LeBlanc?
We'll break this case down piece by piece next Wine Wednesday on the next episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.